Episode 1. You ready?
I'm ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm excited.
Welcome to Meet Cute, a podcast where friends Jenn
and Priscilla Wilson
get together to discuss all things rom-coms, from the classics to the latest releases. We'll be diving deep into the world of romantic comedies. Sleepless in Seattle. Tell me about this movie.
Yeah, episode 1. We're covering the classic 1993 hit Sleepless in Seattle. And for those who have not seen it, the film centers around the character Sam Baldwin, who moves to Seattle with his son Jonah after his wife passes away. About a year and a half after her passing, his son Jonah calls into a talk radio program in the hopes of finding a new wife for his father. And while he's talking to this therapist on this radio program, he calls his father over. Sam grudgingly gets on the line to discuss his feelings with this therapist. Meg Ryan, who is Annie Reed, she is a reporter from Baltimore. She hears him speaking to the therapist on this radio program. She falls for him, even though she's newly engaged. And then ultimately she ends up writing a letter to him to try to propose a meetup at the Empire State Building on Valentine's Day. And that's what this movie is really about, what it boils down to.
Let's talk about this movie. I mean, it is a very classic movie. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. A lot of cultural aspects to this. I think one of them, and I don't want to jump ahead if we don't want to, but tiramisu was a huge part of this. Tiramisu is tiramisu in America thanks to this movie. Am I right? Did I remember that correctly?
Yeah. I read that somewhere that it kind of put tiramisu on the map. And so I think around that time, I distinctly remember being little and people talking more and more about tiramisu, and it seemed to kind of like explode after this movie because it talked about it. So yeah, that's a fun fact. And I'm a big fan of tiramisu, so like, thank you.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. So this movie, thanks to this movie, tiramisu is a huge deal in America. Which in the movie, again, jumping ahead, but in the movie, it sounds like they're talking about a sex position. My dumbass, when I first watched it, was like, is this really a sex position? Or like, have I been living under a rock? What is this? But no, it was actually a very clever way to bring tiramisu into it. I mean, Priscilla, you can probably do it better justice than how I'm telling the story, but
I mean, it sounds like you're very connected to Tom Hanks' character because he's pretty clueless about tiramisu as well. And so when his friend, who's played by Rob Reiner, brings up tiramisu, he panics and just assumes it's a sexual position because they're talking about dating, which you assumed it's a sexual position. So I really love that about you. You have that in common with Sam.
I'm happy I do, except I'd rather have more in common with Rob Reiner, if you know what I'm saying.
We can't discuss this. I will not discuss this. I can't believe it.
We have to. It's a segue, and I'm going to take it. Rob Reiner is a whole vibe. He is babe. I liked him then. I like him now. I think the last thing, I think I saw him in something else before New Girl, or after New Girl, I should say. I'll take him. Nobody wants him. I'll take him.
Nobody wants him, Jen.
Then he is mine.
This is unacceptable. Anyway.
Anywho, so a couple of the fun things that happen in this movie. We have Walter, which we have not touched on just yet. I mean, I know I went straight into tiramisu.
You went right into like the middle of the movie.
I'm always late, and now I'm just cutting right in the middle of the movie. But anywho, let's take it back a little bit more to the beginning.
So the movie begins with Sam's wife having already passed. We meet these characters. They've already experienced this loss. When Sam's coworker goes to express his condolences to him at his architect firm, he gives him a card for like grieving spouses or what have you. And Sam kind of has like a meltdown and kind of lashes out at him. It's something that people just keep coming up to him and giving him unsolicited advice and all these cards for all these support groups. And eventually he just kind of realizes like, okay, I need to get out of this environment and get my son out of this environment because we can't move forward with our lives. So he tells his coworker he's been thinking about getting away. And the coworker just kind of assumes, oh, yeah, take a break, spend some time with your son. And he's like, no, like leaving Chicago because everywhere we look, we see my wife. And he comes up with the idea to move to Seattle, and everything kind of moves very quickly. And he makes that snap decision, moves over there, and then it fast forwards 18 months after he decides to make the move. And this is where we meet Meg Ryan's character, Annie, and her new fiance, Walter. Walter is something else. Meg Ryan as Annie is super adorable and quirky, very girl next door vibe, very type A personality. Walter is allergic to everything. He's a mess. He's a mess.
Well, here's the funny thing. When we first see Walter, right? Very handsome man. And you just have Annie like talking at him, telling him this whole rundown of her family. So you don't think anything of him other than like he's handsome. Then he sits at the dinner table, sneezes all over the food.
Allergic to everything.
Right. This is a chaotic scene in all angles of it all. And it's a beautifully, I think you've said this before, Priscilla, it's a beautifully written scene. You love the give and take. You love the back and forth in it because there's chaos, but it's well organized chaos.
Yeah, I definitely like the writing and the way everybody played out this scene.
Yeah, you have a man sneezing. You have another one just the only thing out of his mouth is bees and that he's allergic to bees. Then you have, hey, we're engaged, but this is the first time the family's meeting her boyfriend.
That's wild to me.
Now the whole family literally heard she was engaged a minute later and they're talking about things about the wedding and what she should do, which I can't remember the specifics, but they were like, if he was allergic to salmon, and he's like, I don't know, again, because he's allergic to everything. Then we go into the next scene and we have Annie and her mom's pulling out her grandmother's dress. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's her grandmother's wedding dress that she's saved. And apparently the Historical Society has asked her if she wanted to part with it. Exactly. Who are you? Who is your family?
Yeah.
Why are they asking about your dress? But either way, she's kept this dress for her daughter, and they get into a whole conversation about how Annie and Walter met. And her mother's just like overjoyed and just really seems very excited for her daughter. And Annie seems happy, but a lot more subdued. And she tells the story to her mother about how they met at a deli. They basically ordered the same exact sandwich, except the bread was different. One of them ordered wheat, one of them ordered white, and the sandwiches were given to the wrong people. And so they found each other that way. They had to switch sandwiches, and the rest is history. They got into a relationship, all that. And her mom finds it so exciting and so romantic and dives into this whole thing about how it's fate that they got together. Annie doesn't really seem convinced on the idea that they were like meant to be in each other's lives. And she kind of dismisses it and says that people are so uncomfortable with the idea of things just kind of happening accidentally or coincidentally that they've labeled it destiny or fate. And I find that very interesting. So as a quick pause, I'd like to hear your take on the whole destiny versus coincidence thing. What side are you on?
Two answers here, because there's an answer based on this movie. Everything seems to point out that her and Annie and Walter will end up together and should be together. They had a cute meet cute, the whole sandwich, which don't get me started. It was a lettuce and tomato sandwich.
Yeah, it serial killer type of order. Like,
I really hope there was some salt and pepper on that tomato at least to give it some flavor. But anywho, yeah, I feel like in this movie, they answer very much, everything seems to point that her destiny could have been with Walter. Like, she could have had a fabulous life with Walter. However, there was this other thing nudging, right? And it's Sam and Jonah and this whole other thing, which it ends up being what happens in the movie, what ends up happening in the movie, and she meets her true love. But in real life, I know I've shared this with you before, like, I do believe the future is already written, and whatever choice we make today, that choice was ultimately the choice we were going to make, and our future is written for us. That's sort of what I like to believe. I think, I've used the example before where it's like, if I was going to wear a yellow shirt or a pink shirt today and I decided to wear the pink shirt, that destiny per se, or that future, was already pre-written. And the fact that, yeah, I was gonna wear the pink shirt and the guy was gonna think I was cute and we were gonna fall in love and I was gonna be Mrs. Reiner, whole thing.
oh God. I can't support this crush, Jen. I can't support it.
You have to. You have to.
I
Friendship
love
is about
you.
supporting each other.
I know. I support you with so many things, but I can't support you with this.
You make it sound like I'm unhinged. Anywho, so yeah, that's my take on it. I think I know where you land on this, but talk to me a little bit about this.
I definitely believe in destiny. I believe that there are certain things that are meant to happen in your life, that there are certain people that you are meant to meet. And I do believe that you have free will and can make decisions on how you get there. The destination is something that, like, that is what is meant to happen. Whether or not you understand the reason for that happening, that is meant to happen in your life. You can choose the path to get there. It might take you longer with certain choices that you make, but that's where I fall on that. Yes, there is free will in the mix there, but ultimately, the major things that happen in your life were supposed to happen. That's my take on that whole debate. It's funny that her mother is so, like, hopeless romantic, believes in fate and soulmates, and her daughter is like the complete opposite of her. And it really sounds like it's not something that she's ever really put much thought into when she starts asking her all these questions about Walter and, like, does he have a nickname, and like all these things that she's probably never even thought about, and just kind of got caught up in this whole relationship, and here's the next step, and just never really stepped back and took a really good look at their relationship and whether or not it's something that she really wanted. So I think her mom starts turning her wheels, so to speak, about their relationship and their marriage. Or
Yeah, it's almost like Annie got into a relationship with Walter and so many boxes checked off that she forgot to almost check her heart into the relationship.
yeah, because they're the good on paper couple.
Yeah. Her brain checked into that relationship from the beginning. She was like, oh, yeah, this is good. This is good. This is good. We work out. I mean, I think there's even a scene where they're getting ready to go to bed and it's like they have a whole,
They have a whole routine. They
yeah.
don't miss a beat. They know they can anticipate the other person's next move. Yeah.
Yeah. So she checked her brain in, checked her heart, or left her heart at the door. And I think this conversation with her mom began to sort of spark that curiosity
Mm-hmm.
because she started to feel like, okay, maybe something's missing.
When her mom mentions feeling that magic with her
With her
father.
dad.
Yeah. And Annie kind of looks like confused. You kind of know right off the bat, like, oh, girl. I did want to make a quick point about the dress. So,
The ugly dress?
oh my God. Yeah. So she tries on the ugly dress and the even more hideous veil. And what ends up happening?
A sign.
Yeah.
A sign that she is trying to wear the dress with the wrong man.
Yep. The dress rips. And I think her mom even says it's a sign if you believed in signs. So, like, her mom believes in that kind of thing, but Annie doesn't. But you start to see that you're right. It sparks something. It gets her wheels turning, and it kind of stays with her with everything else that happens in the rest of the movie.
It's just like, when you're really good friends with a guy, and if someone says, you guys would make a cute couple, and immediately it's like, great, now you can't see him the same anymore.
Mm.
So it's like that. I feel like she's not going to be able to see a relationship with Walter the same now because she's aware of this thing that they don't have.
Right. So yeah, so then fast forward to Annie in the car, driving to Walter's family's house for Christmas after leaving her family's house. And it's live radio, which is wild because in order to hear anything back then, like, you had to catch it at the right time. There was no going back. There was no DVR. There was no binging podcast whenever you wanted to and going back to different episodes. Like, you had to catch it in real time. And so she stumbles upon the program that Jonah has called into this therapy show, and he's telling the therapist that he's really concerned for his dad. His dad doesn't sleep. He thinks that his dad is still missing his mother and that he hasn't fully moved on, and he would love for his dad to find a partner because he thinks that he's sad. And so the doctor ends up convincing Jonah to convince his father to get on the phone, and Sam gets on the phone and just talks about everything and speaks so beautifully about his wife. And of course, Annie's like engrossed in the whole thing. Women all over the country are tuning in. You see her stop at a diner, and all these women are like, "The show's back on. Turn it up." And isn't that just typically us? Like, we love a vulnerable, wounded man.
We wanted to fix him.
Yep.
And also, I just remember something about that scene in the diner. Now, these people that don't know him are starting to judge him or speculate about his life.
Mm-hmm.
That's also very us. We try to piece the story together in our head.
Yeah. And, him talking about the wife and the grief that he feels, like the waitresses at the diner, they're already like in love with him. They're like, let me know who he is because I'll snap him up. And it's so funny. We appreciate a vulnerable man, and ultimately we all want a guy to like feel that way about us. Fast forward to the scene where she and her friend Becky are at her house watching An Affair to Remember, which is what this movie was inspired by. Annie is conflicted and toying with the idea of writing a letter to send to the radio station to Sam because she can't stop thinking about him. She can't get him out of her head. She can't get the story about what happened to him and his son out of her head. So she decides to try to write this letter and try to get to know him better / meet him.
Yeah. And I loved how, she starts her letter, "Dear Sleepless and Son, I have never written a letter like this in my life." And I think I remember correctly, Becky like even made a joke about it. That is how all strangers start their letters.
Not that I've never done this before.
It's the I've never done this before for me. I mean, I have to confess, I've totally done this before. I've slid into DMs with this narrative of I've never done this before. I love that Becky called her out.
Yeah. And what ultimately happens is Annie's writing the letter and then thinks better of it because she's like, what am I doing? I'm engaged to Walter. Tries to say some bullshit like, I'm madly in love with Walter. You even see Becky giving like side eye, like she knows he ain't it. So she crumbles the letter, throws it in the trash, and what ends up happening is that Becky saves the letter and sends the letter out on her behalf without her knowing.
Yeah. So she sends the letter out. Becky is a master plan type of bitch because she sends the letter out and then arranges for Annie to go to Seattle to get the scoop on the story.
Oh yeah, she crafts the whole lie about her getting sent out to Seattle for some kind of article so that she can tell Walter. Like she has an alibi, she has a backstory for why she's flying out there. Becky don't like Walter.
No. But meanwhile, right before, so we land on her about to head to Seattle because Becky sends her out. Meanwhile, Sam is living a whole life over there, right? There are letters that he receives in Seattle from women all over the country, including a special shout out from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And he has to show Jonah where Oklahoma is.
That whole thing between the two of them where like every time Jonah reads a letter that he likes and he tells him where the woman is from, the fact that he like immediately goes to this map that's just behind him in the kitchen and giving him a geography lesson every time. I think that's so cute.
It's really cute. And now that I think about it, like, do people just have maps in their kitchen? Am I missing something? Should I have a map in my kitchen?
I didn't know anybody who had a map in their kitchen.
So he gets all these letters and he's living a whole life, but he also starts dating a coworker, Victoria.
She's like a contractor or something on whatever house they're working on. And he decides to like call her and set up a dinner date because all those letters are really just making him think like, I don't want to meet someone like this, which is basically the equivalent of a dating app back then, like just receiving a weird letter from somebody, maybe a picture. And so he decides to get back in the game. He decides to call Victoria and set up a dinner date.
And they go out to dinner. If we go back to Baltimore real quick, Annie sent a private investigator to get a picture of Sam.
That's wild.
I have a hot take on this. It's not really a hot take, but we'll talk about it a little bit later. But yeah, so while Sam is at dinner with Victoria, there are pictures being taken of him. They're having a fairly good time. And then it comes a time, when Jonah has to meet Victoria, and Jonah is just not a fan of Victoria. He is sassy, but he's not a fan of Victoria because he did get the letter from Annie, and it also mentioned the Baltimore Orioles, and I think they're like a big fan of them or something. I don't understand why that was significant.
The letter mentions a third baseman that his father is a big fan of, and he like sees that as a major sign that they would be like super compatible with each other. He really likes Annie's vibe and everything that she writes in the letter, and he becomes fixated, and he's trying to get his father to pay attention to this one letter.
Yes. And that's where I remember his little friend Jessica also was like, yeah, like this is a sign. So Jonah is coming off as the kid that, hey, I really wanted my dad to get together with someone in theory, but now that it's happening, I don't like it. And that's how Sam and Victoria are sort of perceiving Jonah's actions, whereas Jonah is like, no, Victoria, you may be a very nice lady, but the one is Annie, and I know it because of this letter. So Jonah, with the help of Victoria, decide to write Annie back to agree and say, yes, we'll meet you at the top of the Empire State Building on Valentine's Day. Now, here's the thing. And I lost it when Annie received the letter and read it. It is very much a letter written by children.
Yeah, the language being used, the abbreviations, and Annie's like, who is this man?
Yes. So immediately she's like, she's like, again, what am I doing? Moves on. I would have done the same thing, Priscilla.
Yeah, I would be very put off by that letter. And I think Becky even says they can't all be smart, or like she
Yeah.
makes some kind of comment. She's very supportive of this whole match because she really don't like Walter, you guys.
So Sam and Jonah are at the airport. They're dropping off Victoria. She's going on a trip. And Jonah's, being a whole character like he is. And as they are talking about how dating works, because again, Sam thinks Jonah's just not happy with the idea of his dad dating.
Mm-hmm.
We see Annie pop out of the gate and Sam sees her and he, breath taken away because she's gorgeous.
Mm-hmm. And she doesn't notice him.
She does not notice him. We have Annie actually figuring out where they live. She went to their house. She couldn't find them, but she saw them taking off in a boat. So she followed the boat from the road in her car.
It's so crazy.
How creepy is this?
It's
Take away the
creepy.
whole context of how we know this movie will end.
Yeah, it's crazy. Can you imagine? Like, I don't care what your intentions are. This whole stranger flew across the country and shows up on your doorstep. And then she secretly watches them. She like follows them in the car. She can see the boat from the bridge that she's driving over. She parks and then she like is hiding behind buildings and shit because she's watching them interact.
She's watching them play at the beach.
Yeah. And like while the playing is heartwarming, her stalking is so like it's so
Yes.
wild. It's so crazy. Just the whole concept. Like full disclosure, I love this movie. And I really have to set aside the whole craziness of the stalking and the hiring of the freaking detective agency. Like she's extra about it. Like
Thank you.
I really have to set that aside if I'm looking at the story as a whole.
Take away how this movie ends. There is a creepy woman that is writing a letter to ask you to meet her in a whole nother state just because she's going to be in that state. Okay? First off, the ball's on her.
With her fiance.
So she's going to be on this date. So she says, you know what? Come meet me here because there's this very romantic thing that I just watched in a movie and I want to redo it, right? And then knowing that he has a son, okay? And then she is in the middle of the road in that other scene.
She goes again to where he lives and she parks on the side of the busy road and she starts to walk over, which I love this movie. I love this movie. I love this movie.
No,
I have to keep telling
you. Beautiful. It is a beautiful movie, but again, we are taking away how it ends. We don't know how it ends. We just know that there's a crazy woman.
Right. So she parks on the side of the road. She gets out, she starts walking, and then she kind of stops in her tracks in the middle of a busy road because she sees Rita Wilson's character, who plays his sister in the movie. She's there to visit them. She runs up to Jonah and to Sam, gives them both big hugs. And so, of course, Annie is thinking, oh, this must be his girlfriend. So she's like totally thrown off and just stands in the middle of the road. Cars are beeping at her. And then Sam turns around and sees her, recognizes her from the airport. Like, this is the woman that I was like, oh my God. And he starts walking to the road and they say hello to each other.
It's beautiful. However, if Sam didn't think she was mesmerizing at the airport, he could have called the cops right then and there and said, there's this woman following me. Because it was beautiful. It was so magnetic. Hello. It was gorgeous. But now we see her in New York. She's in New York. She has to meet Walter for Valentine's Day.
I think they were going to some event there, but then I think they were also going to register for all their wedding stuff.
So we leave her there in New York for a second, and we head back to Seattle. And in Seattle, now we have Jessica. Again, a whole mood.
I love Jessica.
She is helping Jonah get on this flight to New York so that Jonah himself can go to the Empire State Building.
Yeah, he gets into a whole argument with his father. Doesn't understand why his father won't just fly across the country and meet the stranger.
Mm-hmm.
Their whole argument, by the way, like, it never fails to make me laugh out loud.
Mm-hmm.
When Sam is like muttering under his breath, like how he's going to get laid this weekend, and then talks about how many women that he's slept with. And he notices his son standing there and he goes, "How long have you been standing there?" And he's like, "Forever."
And then repeats exactly what Sam just said.
Yeah.
Which I think he was counting how many women he slept with. And I think it was like 7. And then he'd remember the 8th one. It was so cute. So cute.
Their whole dynamic is pretty amazing. And the final question, like, he asks his father, why won't you go? And he brings up the movie Fatal Attraction, which is so funny. He's like, I saw it. Every man in America saw it. It scared the shit out of me.
Again, I am glad for that line because, yes, this is crazy.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, he is kind of rational to a point, but that whole back and forth made me laugh so hard. So Jonah decides to take matters into his own hands, or at least teaming up with Jessica, this good friend of his, who, let's be real, Jessica is the equivalent of like the astrology girl that moms warn their sons about, because she talks about how they're made for each other, that his father and Annie must have been loves in a past life and they found each other again, and like all this stuff. I think it's I'm like, oh, so she's astrology girl. Like that's why his father is also like, why are you friends with this girl? He seems very concerned about this friendship. But Jessica's parents are travel agents, and this is why she knows how to book a flight, how to get around any questions for this freaking 8-year-old to get on a long haul cross country flight by himself.
She is, exactly, because she grew up in the business. She is so good at this. She scores him a first class seat. So he is adorable in his little first class seat flying to New York City. Now, very quickly, as Jonah's in this plane, Sam realizes Jonah's missing before he heads out. And I don't recall exactly how it happened, but I know we end at Jessica's house and her parents are asking her, what did you do? Where's Jonah? She finally says, I put him on a flight.
Yeah, I think his father just realizes if anybody knows where his son is, it's probably Jessica, because they're such good friends.
Oh my gosh, I love Jessica's dad. He's like, Jessica, this is your father. Like, no, Dutcher, look, you're right in front of her. But anywho, so I love how I want to assume that now Jessica's parents, realizing what Jessica has done, have taken some ownership and said, okay, we're going to put you on a plane, Sam, to go get your son, right? Free of charge, just how Jonah's traveling. But explain to me how Jonah got a first class seat, but they couldn't get Sam on a first class seat. They owe Sam this. They owed him a first class seat.
And Jessica's just a good friend.
Wow. It felt a little uncomfortable by that, because I thought the least you can do, your daughter just sent this man's son across the country by himself. And the least you could do is put this man on the next flight there on a first class seat for free. That's all I'm going to say. I rest my case.
I am not going to argue with you. I think you're right. That's a valid point.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So as Jonah and Sam are traveling to New York now in separate flights, one on first class and the other one in economy, you have Annie and Walter back in New York, and they are doing what?
They are registering for their wedding gifts. And it's another reminder to her, like, now you've come to this point where she's flown out to Seattle. She's kind of met him from afar. They exchange the hello. There's some kind of energy there. A lot has happened, and they're registering for gifts, and they're thinking the same way. They're, the person that's helping them is asking them, how many of I think the plates that they wanted, and they answered the
Yeah.
same number, and then they have the same reasoning. She's kind of even like talking to herself, like you can see that she's like, we are aligned on so many things. We have so much in common. But the truth of the matter is, in real life, just because you have a lot in common with somebody doesn't mean that the chemistry's there. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily right for you. And she knows this. She knows that
Yep.
Walter is good on paper, but there is no spark.
I think it's hard because if we again remove this movie, I think she would have made it with Walter. Would she have been the most happy? Probably not.
Right, right.
But she could have been maybe content.
She probably could have had a fine life
That's it.
with
A
Walter.
fine life.
It would have been fine. It would have been comfortable. You can definitely tell with couples like who still has that spark for each other. Do I
Mhm.
think that passion fades? Of course it does. I think it
Mhm.
ebbs and flows. And ultimately, a relationship should be built on something a little bit deeper than passion, because once it fades, there better be something substantial to replace that.
Mhm.
Friendship, respect, something that's going to keep it going for all those years, right? They didn't have that. She and Walter,
No.
I think I could have seen them, they would have been content. It would have been a whole if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind
Mhm.
of situation.
Mhm.
But it seems like from the start, even going back to her conversation with her mom,
Mhm.
it's almost like she went through like an awakening. She couldn't ignore her intuition. Like there were
Yeah.
just things that were set in motion that she wasn't going to be able to kind of push that aside.
We now go to, Annie and Walter are sitting down to have dinner right across from the Empire State Building.
Mhm.
And, they have a great conversation. Annie tells him about the things she's been up to. And he's so understanding.
Yeah. He's like very cool with everything.
I think that showed a lot of maturity. I think Walter is a very mature man because part of him said, you know what? I don't want you. I don't remember his exact line, but it was something along the lines of, I don't want you to settle for me.
Right. He didn't want her or anybody. Like he didn't want to
Right.
be that person that somebody was just settling for. And I really appreciated his reaction. Do I think that that would be a typical reaction from somebody if that, like, imagine like you're with your significant other, you're engaged to boot, and you're sitting there and they're like, I have to tell you something, and then dive into this whole crazy story about hearing somebody at a radio show and they just felt this pull and even fucking lie to you
Mhm.
and flew out to like stalk this person. I don't
Mhm.
think a normal person would react so calmly, but I appreciated that he didn't resist what was happening. Like he just kind of accepted it.
I agree. Here's my theory. Walter had major main character energy. I don't want anybody to settle because I know what I bring to the table. My allergies and all.
But you have to wonder, at least I wondered,
Mhm.
if him taking that so calmly wasn't a sign that maybe he didn't feel a certain way about her as well.
Maybe when she started becoming distant, I think he might have mentioned something about he
Mhm.
kind of noticed.
Mhm.
Maybe that gave him room to question how he
Right.
felt about her.
Right. Couldn't help but think that at the end there when they were
Yeah.
talking about it, and he's encouraging her to go
Mhm.
to the Empire State Building to check
Mhm.
it out because, he doesn't want her to regret not doing it. So we see Empire State Building, Jonah's up there. He's looking around, he's asking all these women if they're Annie, and then he just kind of sits alone. And then his father reaches the Empire State Building and finds him.
Beautiful scene. But while that's happening, we have challenges. Oh, but these are like, they're coming hot. I mean, Annie's rushing. She can't get into the elevator because the observation deck is closed. I'm trying to remember, but like now that like she goes up the elevator because she finally convinces the security guard that this is like that she needs to go up there. Now you have her riding up one elevator while Jonah and Sam are getting in the other one and riding down. So when she gets up there, there's no one there. But immediately, and again, I feel like this is nothing special. But when they got on the elevator, I was like, he doesn't have his backpack. This is what she's going to find. She's going to find his backpack. So I was so excited because, you know, you got those challenges that make you feel like they're never going to meet. They come back. She's holding a backpack. And now they all see each other.
They finally meet, and it's like instant chemistry. You feel that magnetic energy between them, and
it's special. It's big. And he's like, you know, let's go, and invites her to go, and then connects
out his hand. Yeah.
Yes. So there's that connection, and then they head off. Sometimes I think this is one of my biggest issues with rom-coms. I like more closure than that.
I'm good with the ending. I think it's a good ending. I think just because it all falls in line with the destiny soulmate thing, like, you know, them just missing each other, but not really, like the backpack was left, like they were, if you think this way, like they were always going to meet each other. Like, look how many times they crossed paths, and while they did recognize each other from the street, and like he saw her in the airport and all that, you can see like a deeper recognition, almost like a soul recognition, if I can be sappy. It's just like I don't know, like a click. So that's how the story wraps up, and I love this movie. I've seen it many times, and to me it holds up. It holds up as like one of the top tier rom-coms, in my opinion. I think the script is funny. Like, there's so many nice funny moments peppered in, heartfelt moments. Aside from her whole stalker like thing going on, I give it a rating of 5 out of 5 Empire State Buildings.
That's bold.
It is, but I really do love it. Like, it had been a few years since I had last seen it, and watching it over again, I was like, this holds up. For me, it holds up. So Jen, let me have it. What's your overall impression? What's your rating?
My final rating of this movie, you're not going to like it. I know that already. I'm giving this movie 3 Empire State Buildings.
Okay. What's your reasoning?
There's a few things that come to mind about this movie. Number one, it's a great movie. It really is. It's a really great movie, and I think that's why it has the 3 Empire State Buildings.
Meanwhile, I gave it 5 out of 5 Empire State Buildings. I would say that that's better than 3.
The sass.
You're like, it's great. That's why I got 3. And I'm like, well, it's great because that's why I gave it 5.
You're so sassy with this right now. I will say I'm going to give it 3, and I'm going to stand firm on that 3. And here's why. It's a great movie, but I have some qualms. I wanted to see some closure. We didn't even see them kiss.
That's true. That's true. You never do see them kiss.
I wanted some closure. And then, I mean, spoiler alert, but Meg and Tom have done other movies. And I like the other one more.
Interesting. Okay. This one, out of all the movies they've done, this one is definitely my favorite one.
All right, everyone. I think this is where we wrap up.
Yeah.
Great conversation. First episode, Priscilla.
Loved hearing your take on this. I was very surprised.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. I wanted to keep you on your toes, and I think I've done that. And I had a great time. So
Me too.
Yeah, we should probably log off now and get something to eat. I'm hungry.
Yeah. I'm ready to eat.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us today. If you'd like to send any movie recommendations our way, or just, a little love note, you can drop us a line at podcastmeetcute@gmail.com, or find us on Instagram and TikTok at the Meet Cute Pod. Enjoyed the show? Subscribe today on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And finally, a big shout out to Spreaker from iHeart for being such a great podcasting platform. Until next time.